As president of the society, Tony took the chair.
Yes.
And on this occasion, Tony did not set himself on fire, but someone sitting in one of the front rows was lighting a pipe, and a little bit of spark went into the matchbox, and there was a little flutter, and an acrid smell drifted out. Tony always went to sleep when he put his glasses on top of Great Dome's head and closed his eyes. When the puff of smoke reached Tony, he slowly awoke, put his glasses slowly onto his nose, put out a fatherly figure, fatherly hand to the person who was reading the lecture to stop him, and said in a muscular voice, "Is someone burning prematurely?" And it was a masterstroke, as you can imagine.
Do you think he really went to sleep, or was he just...
Oh, I don't think so, no. I think it was...
relaxing.
Yeah.
How old was he?
Sorry?
About how old was he at this point?
Oh, as far as I was concerned then, because I was only... whatever it was,
22.
I was 23, but yes. He was an infant at age.
Did you know Eileen Power at all?
Never.
No.
Never. I mean, she died in 1940, was it not?
Yes, it was early.
That was before I became aware of all these things. Although I heard quite a lot about her, of course, from Boston and from Cynthia, because I got to know Boston quite well immediately after in 1955, when everything happened to me in 1955 except marriage. That was postponed for 3 years. I mean, not because I knew the person I was going to marry then, but. As I say, everything happened in 1955, including the fact that I became assistant editor of the Economic History Review at that time, of which Boston was then the editor. So we had I had quite a lot to do with him then. And also, in the 50s, he was in the process of initiating the International Economic History Society with Brodell, and I became this was before the International Association was actually set up, but I was sort of informal secretary of the association, and Kenneth Beryl, who was then in 55, Kenneth Beryl was then first purser here, and Kenneth Beryl became the treasurer of the incipient society, as I became its secretary, and both of us were essentially dancing at the feet of Boston and trying to pick up all the ends which Boston was scattering in his way. But so.
Did you stay? Did you go to Oxford for a while, or did you stay here for the whole of your career?
No, I was here. Save only that I spent the academic year 1952 to 3 in the United States, in Harvard and in MIT, and that was Charles Wilson again said, "Look, my boy," he said, "you better learn some economics," and that had not been possible within the history tripos here, significantly anyway. And so I had a fellowship. It was to be from 1951 to 52, immediately after I graduated, but Charles Wilson forgot to send the application in, so I had to reapply, but then he did send it in, because I pushed him to. I was then on the alert to make sure he did, and I went to the United States from 1952 to 53. But that was the only time that I'd left Cambridge before 1968, when I was appointed in Oxford, and was in Oxford 20 years.
Tell me about the Oxford time. I mean,
The Oxford?
the period in Oxford. Were there particular people there who you became close to and influenced your work?
Habakkuk was. I succeeded Habakkuk.
Ah, right.
Habakkuk had been appointed Master of Jesus in Oxford, and in Oxford you couldn't at the same time hold a chair and be head of house, so he resigned, he resigned for the chair, and I applied for the chair. And I applied for the chair because David Jocelyn had succeeded Poston here when Poston retired, and David Jocelyn was 2 years older than I was, and that meant that the Cambridge chair was, in anticipation, was blocked until I was reached the age of 65, and that seemed to me an inordinate time ahead. And I hadn't thought about applying applying for a chair elsewhere. Look at that rain. When Habakkuk vacated the chair in Oxford, I was induced to apply at that time, and so I did so. And then, you know, as the ironies of this life turned out, within a year and a bit, David Jocelyn had a heart attack and died on his way in October 1969, I think it was, coming back from his first lecture in Mill Lane, and I had gone to Oxford in '68 and took up the chair for 1st of January '69, I think it was. Anyway, then a lot of people in Cambridge, because all our friends were in Cambridge, the children, all their friends were in Cambridge, all my colleagues were in Cambridge, and a lot of people in Cambridge said, "You must apply for the chair in Cambridge." Said, come back. And at first it was an attractive supposition of thought. But then when you thought about it, the more you thought about it, the more impossible it was. But anyway, because I'd just taken up the chair in Oxford, children were at school, we bought a house, and so on. But then in the end, a group of people in Cambridge sent Poston to Oxford to try and persuade me to apply for the chair here, because it was vacant following David Jocelyn's death. And I said, look, well, yeah, it's all very nice, but and flattering, but you think if I applied for the chair and didn't get it, then I would be a rat that failed to jump off the ship in Oxford. I could never look anyone in the face in Oxford again. He said, "My dear Peter," he said, "to be no need to," he said. A very Boston remark. I stayed in Oxford and would have done anyway, I think, for 20 years.
Which college were you attached to?
All Souls.
All Souls.
All Souls funded the chair in 1931. And they offered it to Tony. Tony would have been the first holder of the chair in Oxford, but he declined to leave London. Was
W.G. Hoskins still at All Souls at that time?
Yes, he was, but he never appeared. I mean, he showed a profound reluctance to leave Devonshire, to leave Exeter. So I seldom saw him.
You saw Joan Thirsk, I expect?
Yes, of course, of course. but Habakkuk was the person who was most prominent on my horizons, so to speak.
Tell me, it's a big, tall order at the end of an interview, but it would be very nice if you gave, I know a lot of your work has been to do with the Industrial Revolution, and you've written a number of books around that theme. If you had to sort of give a short resume of what you thought were your major contributions in history, would they be to the theory of the Industrial Revolution, or would they be in developing from your work on the brewing industry, or?
They would be, I think, centred on the more general issues of industrialization. Not, I mean, almost all my work has been based upon primary sources which were British in commitment, but it would be the process of industrialization more generally, and in a comparative sense from the European context as well, and also in business history. I mean, I wrote a history of all the multiple retailing companies which came together when Unilever was formed in 1931, and each of the production companies had acquired a trail of dependent and wholly owned, usually, retailing companies, because the linchpin of the business was margarine, which had induced very large-scale organizations in production, and margarine was a perishable commodity, and therefore to ensure quality as well as to capture downstream profits, they've all integrated forwards to control their own retailing outlets. And when Unilever was formed, which was essentially an amalgamation of the production companies, there was this trail of retailers which each of the main constituent production companies had brought in their wake, and they were then amalgamated and grouped under a holding company called Allied Suppliers. Charles Wilson was then finishing his work on Unilever. I mean, he wrote a very influential business history. It was the first academic business history of its kind, anyway. In not so much for banking, but certainly for industry. And I had then finished brewing, which had not been published, but it was in process of being published. And Charles persuaded me to write the history of the retailing companies which were formed within under the umbrella of Unilever, which I did, and that was published by Longmans in 1967, which what was his name? Christopher Blagden in Longmans wanted to call it counter-revolution. He wanted to call it, but he was only persuaded by his marketing people that would throw a lot of people off the trail, as it was economic history.
Especially in 1967.
That was published in '67,
yeah. And
that gave me an entree to business history, and I've been interested in business history since then. But to come back to your question, it would be the general issue of the comparative processes of industrialization, more particularly in the European context. So.
Well, following that up, I notice you lecture and visit Italy quite frequently. Is that part of this project of comparison?
No, not really. I had from the late 50s, when the International Association was formed, it was formed in, constitutionally anyway, in '62. I began to have a international interest or international horizon, put it that way, and I became the British representative on the junta, which never was a committee more aptly named as a junta in the English sense, at the International Institute in Prato, which was then getting into its stride, and therefore I had this annual commitment in Prato, and met a lot of the Italian economic historians through there. And one of them, called Luigi de Rosa, who was the uncrowned king in economic history of Naples, and ran. He was a very powerful man in Italy, academically, I mean, and I through Luigi, I acquired various commitments in Italy. One of which has been I've been looking after, in various dimensions of looking after, the Journal of European Economic History, which Luigi founded in 1971, I think it was, and I've been involved in that a great deal ever since then. And I read the proofs, and on the. I'm not technically a member of the editorial board, but nothing much happens which I don't know about in that respect. And that has been published by the Bank of Rome, and I'm still very much involved in that. But also, Luigi was a determinant economic historian in the International Institute in Naples, the Institute of Philosophical Studies in Naples. And for the last 10 years, I think it is now, I have been given a course of lectures every year at the Institute in Naples. Luigi died 3 years ago now, but his commitments have lived on after him, and they have wanted me to continue. This is a separate commitment every year, and they have a general theme of the Institute, and I try and fit in with what the Institute is doing in that particular year. But they've published two little books of the lectures, and there's two more in the press in Naples, and that has been an attractive commitment for me, and also I owed a great deal to Luigi, and I've been glad to help to keep his commitments going, so to speak, whether it's the Journal of European Economic History or other associated commitments of the Bank of Rome, which, as with other Italian banks, is metamorphosed. It was bought out and became Capitalia. It's now Unicredit, as a much bigger amalgamated grouping of Italian banks. but it's and curiously they've just gone back to the original name of the Banca di Roma. So that is another international commitment that I keep going.
Hmm. Can I ask you about one further? Well, I don't know if it's a commitment, but I noticed you think you have an honorary degree and you visit Japan. You have an interest in Japan.
Yes, again, I should. It's a source of not embarrassment exactly, but it's something that needs explaining. Put it that way. I have never done any work, any research using Japanese data, nor, for that matter, have I done any work using primary Italian data. But as far as Japan is concerned, I picked up the standard international commitments of links with Japan, with international meetings, and I had one or two, or three or four Japanese scholars who were sent by their professors in Japan to take doctorates in Oxford, and therefore became known to Japanese economic historians in Japan, and that link continues. But also there were two other constituents of that nexus with Japan. One of them, dating from 1952, was when the present Crown Prince, he wasn't Crown Prince then, but when the present Crown Prince, Naruhito, came to Oxford, I became his research supervisor. And that was, I mean, he had bucked the trend of his family, because all his family, his father and grandfather and his younger brother and every cousin, I should think, too, were marine biologists.
That's right.
But Hiro, right from his undergraduate days at Gachuin University, was an economic historian. And when his family and also the Japanese government and the Imperial Household Agency wanted him as a future emperor to spend 2 years in the West, either in the United States or Harvard. Oxford was chosen, or Britain was chosen, and I had been much involved with one of his senior academic advisors in Japan, and so I mean, how the choice was made, I don't know, but anyway, he came to Oxford, and that was from 1952 to 1960. What am I talking about?
72. Well, you went to Oxford in 68, was that right?
He came to Oxford in 1982.
82, yes.
And for 2 years. And as I say, I became his research supervisor, and that commitment has continued to a degree. In fact, I should see him again in November this year. That was one link which consolidated my nexus with Japan, and that meant very much more than I had realized it would at the time in 1982, and it means much more in Japan, I think it does in the UK, than it does in the UK, certainly. But that is one thing, and the other thing is that when I came to Downing in 1987, I found that there was a link with Kale, and that has consolidated.
There's a portrait of Fukuzawa, I noticed.
Yes, that's right.
I wrote half a book on Fukuzawa once.
Oh, yes, well, that's very much there. And also there was a 10,000 yen note, which was
I've got one up there.
by the portrait
I'll show you later. I was given it by a leading Japanese economic historian. I'll tell you the story of Hayami Akira.
Oh yes, I know him very well. Akira.
Yes, I've got his wallet up there with a 10,000 yen note in it.
How extraordinary. Well, the £10,000 note which was framed underneath the portrait, that was stolen in Downing.
Well, many links, but I think we're drawing to the time when I should let you go. Is there anything particular that you would have liked me to have asked you about? And
I mean, we've only just scratched the surface.
I know.
I mean, and also, I've only, I don't know, I scarcely reached Oxford. I mean, and there was a great deal more to be said about Cambridge, clearly. But there we are.
There we are. That's how it is. But anyway, thank you very much indeed.
Good.